Hey, welcome to Taylor's Trick Taking Table. I'm Taylor, and today, since it's August, we'll be covering another local or kind of community game. And you couldn't really get more local than this. It's actually developed by some friends here in Portland, and I even helped kind of tweak some things and develop certain aspects of the game. So take this with a huge grain of salt, since I know and I'm friends with the designers. So I have this back here, this pillar of salt, this, this carton of salt, as a reminder. But that being said, this game's actually based and is named on a city. And it's cool to have games named on cities, like Santorini, or, like New York Zoo, or real historical places, like Yum Yum Island. But what's cool about this game today is it's actually based on my city. That's right, Portland. Lovely, lovely gray Portland, otherwise known as Bridge City. The game is Bridge City Poker. It's by Portland Game Collective, or Lee Giano and Brandon Coonrod. And what's interesting is I've heard Pittsburgh been floated around as a city that has a lot of bridges, so what makes Portland such a good bridge city? Well, let's go outside and I'll show you.
Yo, Mike, our town is dope and pretty. So check out how we live.
Bridge
City.
Portland.
We built this city. We built this city on
Bridges.
and road. Built this city. We built this city on
Bridges. Okay then. So the hook to Bridge City Poker is, it's a climbing shedding game. So you're trying to play all the cards in your hand, but if you ever lose the trick or have to pass into the trick, you actually draw cards from the deck. And there's a deck timer in addition to a player timer. So players are trying to balance this and make sure they've cultivated their hand before the deck runs out. Let's go to the table and I'll show you how to play. The deck in Bridge City Poker is made up of 4 suits numbered 0 through 14. Also included in the deck are going to be various power cards. You're going to have a deck of cards that players are going to be drawing from. So to set up initially, you need to add some power cards to the deck. Right here I have the initial 5 starting ones, so they're denoted with the star down here. And what you would do is you would just make sure everyone kind of understands the different powers that are going to be in the game. I'll explain what some of the symbols mean and what these power cards do later when they come up in the trick taking, but just know that we're going to include these into the deck, shuffle the deck, and then deal out the hands. So now we have it set up for 3 players. Each player is going to get 9 cards to start with, and then the deck's going to be set to the side where players have easy access because they'll be drawing from that over the course of the game. The first player is going to be the left of the dealer, so let's say it's this rose skeleton hand, and what you can play in Bridge City Poker is seen over here. But essentially, it's a single, double, or pair, or triple of cards, a run of 3 to 5, a flush, or a full house. So looking at the hand of the skeleton, maybe they just play a single 1 to the trick. So this sets the meld for the trick. So coming to the Railroad Ink player, they have to play a single. They can't play a pair or whatever else they want to play. So maybe they play a 12. And they didn't have to follow suit. The suits don't matter in terms of the trick play. They matter kind of at the end for scoring. But so they played the 1 in St. John's. They could have also played a different suit. So maybe they played 11 in Fremont. Looking at the festival hand, it's tough because this is actually a climbing game. So when the Railroad Ink player played, they had to play the same number or higher than previously played. So when it comes to festival here, they can play an 11, 12, 13, or 14, but they can't play any of these lower cards. So if they did want to win this specific trick, they could play the 14 of Tillicum. Or they could have optionally passed, because if you pass, you'll draw 2 cards, but in this case, everyone played, and you'll see how if you lose, you actually draw 1 card. So you're trying to shut out, but you're slowly drawing more cards from the deck if you ever lose or pass. So in this case, these 2 players lost to the trick. So they'll draw 1 card each. Then the winner doesn't have to draw any cards. They'll just collect the trick and discard it to the side. Then they lead to the next trick. So looking at the festival's hand here, they have a run that they could play, because it's of 3 length, and you don't have to have the same suits for the run. They also have a triple or a full house, so maybe they do that. So they're going to play a full house. Then coming to Railroad Ink, they have some 12s and some 4s, And what's interesting is they actually drew one of the power cards in the game. So this is a good time to kind of explain what they are and how they work. So as you can see, it'll be a symbol to denote the power card, the name, and then over here are points. So in this game, points are bad, you don't want them, and these are the number of points you'll get if you use this power card. You can always just discard it, and I'll explain how to do that later. But if you were to use the power card, the ability and the power it has is in this box here. So as you can see, the description just says it acts as a wild card from 0 to 14 in any suit. These symbols down here just mean you either can play it with other cards or on its own. So, looking at this situation, a full house was played, and normally this player couldn't have played a full house because they only have 2 4s and 2 12s. But what's nice here is they can play this wild and make this maybe a wild 12, and now they have a full house with 3 12s and 2 4s. So that means they'll win this trick. So like usual, if you lose the trick, you'll draw a card. So the festival pin will draw a card, but if you pass, you draw 2 cards. So the skeleton hand now has 2 more. So if you ever use a power card, it doesn't go into the discard. It's going to stay in front of you because those are going to be points that are added to your total at the end of the hand. So a game of Bridge City Poker can end in one of 2 ways. Either a player sheds out, so say it is the skeleton hands here, and they just play 3 13s. The trick would resolve, so maybe Railroad Inc. has 3 14s they want to play, and after that resolves, players won't draw any cards, you'll just end the round right now. The other way it can end is if when you're resolving the end of a trick, you go to draw cards and there aren't enough in the deck for everyone, then you would actually just discard any, no one would take any, and then you'd play one final round. So in this case, these 2 players lost, you'd go to give them a card, they don't have enough, just gets discarded, and then they will lead to the final round of the hand. When the game ends, players will look at the cards they have left in hand, and these are going to be points for them, except before they do that, they get to burn 1 bridge. So this is where the suits really matter. So looking at the hand of the skeleton rows, they had 2 really high telecums. So normally in the game, this would be like 29 points, which is pretty brutal. But before you count your score, they get to burn these 2 telecums, and now they only have 6 points. Looking at Railroad Inc. over here, what they did really well was they made sure to only have 1 suit. So they get to burn this whole entire suit. So they got 0 points in their hand. However, earlier they played the wild, so they did get 4. So for that hand, you would count any points on the power cards you used, plus any points of the cards left in your hand after you burn a bridge, and that would be your total for the hand. Then the dealer would move to the left, and you play the number of rounds for the number of players, and whoever has the fewest points in the end wins. So now let's go into a power card example. So maybe looking at the festival's hand, they have a 4-card straight here. They'll lead that to the trick. And skeleton hand has a power card in their hand that they wanted to use. So at any time in the trick, you can just play a power card instead of following the meld. And as you can see here, it's a smiley face, meaning it would play alone. The wild had the symbol where it could be played with other cards, because the wild could have been, part of the run or whatever it may be. But so this ditch, you just play it alone. And what it means is whoever plays it will get 3 points at the end of the round, but they get to discard 2 cards of a named bridge. So they'll pick a bridge, and looking at their hand here, maybe they say St. John's. So they could discard these 2 high cards from their hand. And then as you can see here, it says everyone else gets to discard 1 card from that bridge. So then maybe looking at Festival's hand, they can discard this 1 St. John's. Another thing you can do with power cards, if you don't want to use them, you can always discard any number of power cards, and it counts as a loss. So it's nice because it doesn't count as a pass, so you won't draw 2 cards from the deck, you'll only draw 1. So if you ever don't want to use power cards, you can always use them just to kind of toss it, not worry about that specific trick. So that's how to play Bridge City Poker. Then I'm going to show you some of the cool power cards that are in the game. So like, for example, Split here. You can take any card and split it into 2 equal numbers of the same suit. So if you play this split with the 6, that's actually now a pair of 3s. Another interesting one is Wrench. So what it says is you can adjust any cards in the meld up or down by 1. So say you had this right here. You can actually adjust the 5 to a 6 and this 8 to a 7. So now you have 6, 7, 8, 9 when you play the Wrench. Reuse is fun because what it does is you play it alone, but it says after this trick you can play another person's played card back into your hand. So you don't have to draw randomly from the deck. You can take this 14. You can play multiple power cards to the trick too. So like in this example, a 6 was played, then an 11. So I could play Extend and add the 13 to the trick, allowing this player to then play the 14, so that the trick doesn't end. In addition to the trick not ending, Then a player could play upside down. What that does is it allows, starting with your meld, all the players can now be same or lower, so it kind of flips everything on its head. So then they can play upside down 12, and now we're going extend upside down all the way down. So now the festival player can play their 3. And what's also funny is if this character didn't have anything 3 or lower, because now it's going upside down, they could play Scout, which lets you draw cards and then play to the meld if able, which worked because they drew a 3. And like normal, at the end of the trick, everyone who used a power card would keep their power card in front of them as points. So that is Bridge City Poker, and again, I know the designers, and I was a developer on this game, so take this with a huge grain of salt. I will genuinely tell you what I think is really cool about this game, what I think might be reasons you should or shouldn't back this, but again, huge grain of salt, definite bias here, so know that going in. That said, I'll just start about what I love about the packaging and the design. This is kind of my personal preference. I love minimalism and bright colors, and in this incredibly bright lighting, you can really see that. I think the cards really pop. Of course, I'm attached to all the bridges, being that I cross them often in my daily life here in Portland. But yeah, I just think the design's super clean and comes across with a lot of personality and pop. But the bias, you know, so take that with a grain of salt. What I love is that this game has 2 timers. A lot of shading games only have the player-driven timer. You're trying to get out before another player. But the deck has their own timer, and you're trying to pay attention to the deck shedding out as you're paying attention to the other players shedding out. It's a cool balancing act. And I love how at the different player counts, that tension is different. At 4, it's definitely more deck, but at 3, it's definitely more player. And at 2, with some of the rules tweaks, it's kind of a balance of both. So it's cool to be cognizant of different things at the different player counts, but still having that ever like kind of looming threat of the deck as this new element to a shedding game. There's a nice balance between passing and drawing 2 and losing and drawing 1. I think it creates a nice incentive. I know people like to pass at the start a lot to kind of build a hand and then try to shed out. I've always liked player agency on hand size, and it's cool how you can, as a player, choose that. You can push your luck with that in this game. That drawing, when you lose or pass, can be tough though. Sometimes you do a great job, but you kind of mistime it just a little bit, or maybe you just get super unlucky and you'll draw a bunch of cards and kind of just get totally messed over in a round. So there are moments like that in this game. I do think because of that inherent randomness from the deck as you're drawing, you get a sense of a little bit of swinginess. So I'd say that this is more of a tactical game than a strategic game, and to keep that in mind. My favorite mechanism, and this is definitely biased and definitely selfish because I helped develop this one specifically, was that you discard all the cards of a certain suit at the end, whether the deck sheds out or a person sheds out. And I love this because what it does is, if you're really smart about your hand, if you can really curate it and manipulate it, you can end the round with 0 points. You can sometimes do better than the person who shed out. Oftentimes there's kind of a push and pull moment of, do I want to shed out and maybe use some power cards to help myself shed out and take that hit? Is it worth shedding out? And people who kind of just cultivate their hand and burn a bridge at the end, they sometimes do better than the person who shed out. So I love that there's different avenues to victory and different ways to make sure that you get few points during a round. I like that there's power cards in the game. I think they add some fun, kind of crazy moments or interesting ways to use the normal system in play, like the melds and trying to shut out. I like that you can also just like discard power cards if you don't want to use them. I think it's interesting because it does just make getting a power card always good. So I can see how people might think that's a little tough to get. But in other games like Bon or something where you get like a pass card or a joker or a wild, I think a lot of trick takers kind of have that where some cards are a little bit better than others. So I don't mind that slight imbalance. And often, I think, looking back at big moments in this game, it's from those power cards being used in super interesting ways. That's another thing I would say though, if powers and kind of these wacky moments aren't really your thing, you can totally play the game without them. I think it is a less interesting game without the powers. So I definitely keep that in mind as well. if you're interested in this game. Do I like powers? Do I think they would add or hurt a game that I typically like? So that is Bridge City Poker. And again, I'm super biased here, but I like this game. I think it delivers on kind of a traditional climbing shedding game with enough twists, definitely enough powers to make it tactical and fun and new and fresh. I love just changing up the powers every hand and trying to work out this new puzzle and reacting to what players do, but still trying to, tactically understand that when I draw new cards, I don't know what I'm going to get. And if that sounds interesting to you as well, definitely check it out. Thanks so much for watching.
Later that night.
Let's see how many bridges are in Portland. Oh, 12. Okay, 12 bridges. That's pretty good. Let's check Pittsburgh now. What is this? 446 bridges? Also known as the City of Bridges. But that site that called it Bridge City. Oh, look, it's Bridge City. Oh, no. It's by Portland. Portland Simply Fours. It's a biased site. They call it Bridge City. Portland's other nickname. At least there's only 2 that could be Bridge City. There can't be another. No! Bridge City, Texas! What? Bridge? Okay. I can fix this. Let me just inspect here. Change this stupid dumb city. Oh, wait, that's it. Let me call it Dumb City, Texas.